Are we ready to go? Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here today. We have a lot to get through, so I will get straight to it. I will first give you an overview of the situation on the ground. I will then give you a sense of how we can get out of the situation and how can we ensure that we never see this appalling situation again. Then I will take some questions. First, let me be absolutely clear. What we are witnessing in Gaza is a genocide. There is no other way to describe it. The territory has been decimated. 100,000 people have been killed or wounded. 1.9 million people, or 85% of Gaza's population, have been forcibly displaced. They have nowhere to return to because 70% of Gaza's housing stock has been damaged or destroyed. Last month, the International Court of Justice, which has put Israel on trial for genocide, the gravest of international crimes, ordered Israel to do everything to avoid civilian casualties and facilities, or rather facilitate the delivery of aid. What has happened since then? Since the ICJ ruling? Since then, Israel has killed an average of 100 people a day. Since the ICJ ruling, bringing the total from 26,422 to 29,514. Not counting those who are missing, presumed buried under the rubble of their own homes. According to the UN, the delivery of aid has halved since the ICJ ruling, has halved in February. Amnesty International calculates that the average number of aid trucks into Gaza has decreased by a third to an average of 105 trucks a day. Gaza needs at least 500 trucks a day to meet even the most basic of all acute needs in Gaza. At least 500 trucks a day. Israel has still not switched back on running water or electricity supplies, leaving 2.3 million people cold, thirsty, and trapped in unhygienic, overcrowded conditions. Israel is, in the words of Human Rights Watch, disobeying a direct order from the world's highest court. According to Amnesty International, here in the UK, Israel has failed to take even the bare minimum steps to comply with the ICJ ruling. In Rafah, where 1.5 million people have taken refuge and where Israel is threatening its next ground invasion, there are, according to the World Health Organization, 4,500 people to a shower and 200 people to a toilet. Infectious diseases like cholera, like scabies, and other illnesses, bacteria, are spiking. People are starving to death. This past week, we have heard reports of children dying of malnutrition and thirst. Haneen Jum'a, an 8-year-old girl from Gaza City, died of malnutrition and thirst this last Tuesday. Just yesterday, we learned of Muhammad Fattouh, a 2-month-old baby who died of starvation on Friday at the Shifa hospital in the city of Gaza. Everyone who has remained in the north is starving. everyone who has remained in the north is starving. The World Food Programme has been forced to stop aid deliveries to Gaza's north because of unsafe conditions for its staff. Make no mistake, this is a genocide. And it follows a very deliberate and clear Israeli plan of ethnic cleansing. There is a reason Israel has progressively moved millions of people south towards the Egyptian border. And senior Israeli officials have been quite open that they are delivering a second Nakba. To finish what they started in 1948, when 2/3 of the Palestinian people were forced from their land. And it is not just in Gaza. And I would like to stress this. It is not just in Gaza. Since October 7th, Israel has killed around 350 people in the occupied West Bank, among them 100 children. Israel has detained around 4,000 Palestinians from the West Bank in that same period of time, keeping the vast majority in the administrative detention without charge or trial. And some people, especially in the West, wonder why we call them hostages. Why we call our hostages hostages. 14 communities in the West Bank have been entirely depopulated by a combination of rampant settler terrorism and military action. 14 communities. And only yesterday we host the mayor of Masafir Yatta in the parliament to explain to British MPs the ethnic cleansing taking place in Hebron in the West Bank. More than 1,500 Palestinians in the West Bank have been displaced as a result. I'm talking over the last 4.5 months. So members of the media, I could go on. Extrajudicial killings, indiscriminate bombardment, the sexual violence, rape against women and children, Palestinian women and children in Israeli detention. And I refer you to very recent UN reports. The dissemination of Gaza's health sector, the targeting of mosques, churches, cultural centers, sports centers, graveyards, the ban on worshippers at Al-Aqsa Mosque in occupied East Jerusalem. Israel's transgression of international law are many and varied and go back a long, long way, 75 years. They all amount to one thing: displacement and replacement, ethnic cleansing, genocide. It has been clear from the outset what Israel wanted. Israeli leaders from the president on down have been quite transparent. No one can say they did not know. And Israel's allies, including the UK, need to understand their responsibilities. They need to understand their responsibilities. By offering material support for Israel's assault on Gaza, by failing to call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire, by failing to rein in Israel after the ICJ's injunction last month, by continuing arms exports to Israel, and by giving Israel continued legal, political cover, like abstaining in crucial UN Security Council resolution, and I'm talking about the UK here. The United Kingdom government is not helping. It is not helping, it is inconsistent, and comes up with contradictory statements, policies, and actions. The UK publicly says it wants to see aid deliveries to Gaza stepped up. We have even seen the Foreign Office early on appointing a special envoy for humanitarian purposes. But it has also based only on Israeli allegations for which no proof has been offered about very few individuals, staff members of UNRWA. Based on these allegations, the UK announced suspending funding to UNRWA. And UNRWA, this UN agency, is the best position to deliver the humanitarian aid to Gaza that the UK government claims to prioritize. If UNRWA was ever needed, it's now. UNRWA is a lifeblood before the latest aggression, and particularly so now. This is a contradiction and amounts to collective punishment of the Palestinian people in Gaza by the UK government and every country that suspended their funding to the UN agency. The UK says it supports a two-state solution and accountability under international law. Yet, it does not want the ICJ to rule on the legality of Israel's occupation, saying this should be a matter for negotiations. That was the submission of the UK. You know, there are two tracks on the ICJ, one for the genocide being committed by Israel, and one for the legality or otherwise the illegality of Israel's presence in the Palestinian occupied territory. Yet the UK says the ICJ is not the place to deliberate on the legality of Israel's occupation or illegality of it, and negotiation is the place. In other words, the UK opposes the highest court in the world to deliberate on matters of international law, to educate on matters of international law. Either that, or it is suggesting that Israel's occupation is not a matter for international law. The UK is suggesting either that, or that Israel's occupation is not a matter for international law. These positions do not make any legal, political, or diplomatic sense, let alone moral sense. They don't. Inconsistent. They only make sense as positions in blind favor of an ally rather than any appeal to international diplomacy, any appeal to justice, any appeal to law. Just favorism. It is precisely this kind of abuse of the international system that leaves countries of the global south so suspicious and appalled at the conduct and double standards of Western countries. The selectivity, the hypocrisy. There is more. The UK has announced sanctions on four, between parentheses, violent extremist settlers. But considering that all settlements in occupied territory under international law, as per long-standing British policy, are illegal, such steps go nowhere near being enough. Indeed, at the same time, and here is the contradiction again, they put these four illegal terrorists on the sanction list, But at the same time, the UK is sanctioning individual settlers. At the time they are sanctioning individual settlers, the UK government is proposing a law, legislating a law in the UK Parliament that would make it illegal for local authorities to exercise their ethical judgment on whether to procure products or services from Israeli settlements. Effectively, the government wants to make it illegal to boycott settlements, even though these settlements are themselves illegal. Figure that out. Talk of inconsistency. It is but one example of the kind of knots the UK and Israel's other allies have to tie themselves in order to justify their continued support for an Israel so blatantly and so flagrantly in constant violation of international law, of universal human rights values, and of simply common decency. And perhaps the saddest fact is that even if there is a ceasefire today, right this moment, now, projections suggest that because of the extreme destruction and despair Israel has wrought in Gaza, and the time it would take to deliver aid and medical supplies to those most in need, we will likely see yet another 10,000 Palestinian fatalities, even if we achieve ceasefire now. So, moving forward, here we are, and allow me now to break down the steps that we, the State of Palestine, consider necessary to move us forward. Here are 4 guidelines as principles of our initiative. A, there must be no displacement of Palestinians outside our territory. B, there will be no return to the status quo ante. C, we must move immediately to end Israel's 57-year-old occupation of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip. D, there must be full commitment by all parties to international law, international resolutions, and the internationally sanctioned rights such as the right of return and compensation for Palestinian refugees. With that in mind, this is what we must do over the next period. The State of Palestine will be engaged in the following 8 steps. First, we need an immediate and permanent ceasefire which will allow for a hostage exchange. That's number 1. Number 2, Israel must withdraw from every inch of Gaza's territory, every inch of Gaza's territory. Concurrently, we must launch a massive humanitarian relief and reconstruction project in Gaza. Not now, yesterday. Number 4, on the diplomatic level, we need the UN Security Council to admit the State of Palestine as a full member state, removing the US veto. Number 5, on bilateral levels, we need the few remaining countries that have yet to do so, including the UK and the US and mostly European countries, to recognize the State of Palestine on the 1967 borders. Number 6, yesterday's resignation of the Palestinian government should pave the way for a technocratic Palestinian government that will oversee all these steps in all the Palestinian occupied territory, in East Jerusalem, West Bank, and Gaza. All these steps, as well as preparations for presidential and parliamentary elections. Number 7, we must convene an international peace conference that will discuss timetables, specific, short, for implementation, security arrangements, and other modalities. Number 8, and finally, there must be accountability for any and all war crimes and crimes against humanity committed against the Palestinian people. Let me be clear, my friends. We are not here talking about another unending peace process. We've had enough of that. What we are talking about here is the implementation in an unreversible and credible steps. The implementation in an irreversible and credible steps over a period of months rather than years of international law and resolutions to achieve Palestinian liberation in a state of our own. Therefore, this is not the two-state solution that people have been talking about for over 30 years. There is already a state that exists, that is Israel, occupying another state that also exists, that is the state of Palestine. The vast majority of the world, 139 countries out of the UN's 193 countries, member states, have already recognized the state of Palestine. It must be fully sovereign and independent. There must be no room for any Israeli interference in any of its internal affairs, and it must have full control over its borders. So this is about Palestinian statehood. We must stop talking about two states as if we are going to create two states as a solution. This is about Palestinian statehood. It's about independence and ending occupation. That's what we need to do. And for that, we have outlined the 8 steps that will get us there, because it's not complicated. This is the only way out of the current situation. It is the only path forward to a sustainable resolution. And it is the logical and rational approach to adopt by anyone seriously interested in resolution and peace. Let's end the confusion, the deliberate confusion. Israel is engaged in a genocide against our people, and liberation, statehood, freedom, and accountability under law are the only guarantees we have that this will never happen again. Thank you. Now I'll take some questions. Okay, we'll take one from here and one from here.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. My question is regarding what Biden said yesterday. How optimistic are you about the ceasefire, which he's saying is imminent?
Well, I believe Netanyahu and the Israeli government are very good at playing games, at framing, at buying time. Because if you have agreed on the principles, you would stop killing more than 100 innocent people every day. What it looks like on the ground is Israel is relentless on its military campaign until this morning. The rest, we have no substantial evidence that this is being heeded by Israel whatsoever. However, what we want to see is an immediate and permanent ceasefire. An immediate and permanent ceasefire, because everything else based on that. We cannot have the massive humanitarian and reconstruction program without access. We cannot do anything else without reaching an immediate and permanent ceasefire.
You mentioned there's a lot of hypocrisy at play, there's a genocide going on. and Western leaders seem completely oblivious or not interested, whereas they were really quick to condemn Russia, to help Ukraine. They're still giving arms to Ukraine, and instead of actually helping Palestinian people, they're cutting funding to UNRWA. Why do you think that is? You must have spoken to a lot of politicians in the West. Why are they so? Why are they not as keen to help Palestine as they were Ukraine, for example?
You know, the events of the last 5 months or so have really unmasked many things. It has unmasked Israel in a way, in my opinion, that has led to the unprecedented change in the public opinion, perception, and the waves you've seen of people taking off to the streets because of the process of unmasking. But also, equally so, some key Western countries have been unmasked as well. It's clear that rules are not applied the same. There are no equality in the application of rules, and you've invoked Ukraine here, which is an example of how Western countries were quick in describing the situation in accurate manner, that this is an invasion, an occupation, that the people of Ukraine have the right to resist, and not only have the right to resist, but the US, the UK, and the rest of Europe were quick to provide material support, unprecedented for Ukrainian resistance. And the West was very quick to push for Russia to be sent to the ICC and the ICJ. But the opposite, exactly the opposite, has been done when it comes to Israel. We are prevented from accessing international judicial system, concerted efforts at almost flipping the situation upside down, where the West is sending weapons to the side that is committing genocide, not only occupation. So, yes, and I'll tell you, in our opinion, this has become the most existential threat to our international order at this point in time. Because people in the South, people in the East, and millions of people in the West have seen that this system does not work for all. It's not working for all. That there are few countries who really consider this system to be selective and it only applied on your foes, but not on your friends and allies. I very much hope we will repair our international order. Very much hope, because we don't have a better model so far. And we must repair it. But countries like the US and the UK have done a lot by way of damaging the credibility of our international system. Next. Dominique, and then after you. Sorry. Yes?
Okay. You talked about Palestinian statehood, the end of occupation as the final goal. But there are talks that your Prime Minister resigned because President Mahmoud Abbas was negotiating with Israel and with the US post-ceasefire to govern Gaza. How can it ever negotiate, for example, with the US, which is complicit in everything that has happened in genocide? How can you trust that process to achieve end of occupation and a statehood?
Our Prime Minister and the current government resigned to make sure that the situation is irreversibly changing. To make sure that we have a government that is in charge of providing and protecting for our people everywhere they are, including in Gaza. And that a government is enabled, given what Israel has done to the current government in terms of cutting its own funding, money, our own money, in terms of suffocating its ability to do anything, no control of our resources, no control of our borders and what have you. So the resignation of the government is in the context of the political horizon I have just outlined. The formation of a new government is our first step, starting point for the irreversible, credible steps we're talking about. And we have responsibilities as Palestinians, one of which is to provide a government that can provide for its people, a government that can unite its people, unite our political system, and a government that can undertake the two most important tasks. One that is immediate, which is the humanitarian needs of our people, comes first. And number two is the right of our people to cast their votes in a democratic elections and choose their leaders. Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Ambassador. You mentioned the technocratic government. How long before you expect it to be formed? Will it be politically affiliated? And will Hamas have any role in at least a discussion around who should be in the government, if not positioned in the government? And also, when you speak to British and American diplomats, and you talk about the need for them to, or for their states to recognise the Palestinian state, what response are you getting? Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. The political landscape has changed, Andrew, and we are facing a new existential realities. Pre-October 7th was already bad, very bad. I mean, 30 years of failed promises, broken promises. And few years before the 7th of October, this government was unable to perform its duties because of external factors, primarily. So this is to start afresh in the interest of the unity of the Palestinian people, its geography and its polity. That's the key thing. That's the key thing. We want to make sure that the world has that address and the Palestinian people have that government that will be able to unite the people and the polity and the geography. And you know, for the last 30 years, Andrew, my friends here, it's been endless futile negotiations. Now it's about Palestine. And that's why I said it's about Palestinian statehood, not two states. There is already a state occupying the other state. This is the time to focus on the people, our people, and not on political considerations, political factions, parties. This is time to focus on the Palestinian people. They've been injured, hurt, targeted, genocided. And this is a time to focus also on how do we hear our people, not just provide for them, which is number one priority, but hear. So a government that is able to provide and convene elections is the right step forward. And about Hamas, these are, you know, there are discussions, but and there will be many other issues. But this government is a technocratic government. It's not made of any political factions. Because this is not the time of political factions, Andrew. This is the time for the Palestinian people. And of course, this government will have many challenges, starting with how to address the humanitarian catastrophe, the utter destruction of homes, hospitals, schools, how to begin and where to begin, but also political reforms, elections, economic reforms, security reforms. All these are serious matters, and I believe the government of Palestine will address all these relevant issues and those beyond even these issues. I'll tell you the list is immense, Andrew. As for the recognition, you've heard the UK Foreign Secretary recently saying that the UK is considering recognizing the state of Palestine in contribution to a final agreement, in contribution to the two-state solution, as he coined it, rather than as an outcome of it, which that was an important change, because prior to that statement, the UK position was that they will only recognize after the two sides reach a final agreement, i.e. the previous mindset, the previous policy was that a UK recognition can only come if Israel accepts, i.e. there is an Israeli veto. Now that veto has been removed, at least by the statement of the government, and it was followed by a US declaration short after that the US is also considering recognizing the state of Palestine. So there is consideration, but we don't think they should be wasting much time for these considerations. Time is not our friend, Andrew, here. Time is our enemy. And do I need to prove my point, given the calamity you are following? Therefore, let them consider it in a very short period of time. And if recognition is needed, it is needed now. If we let things to spiral the way they are, I don't know if recognition would make any difference later on. Yes?
Thank you, Ambassador. With regard to the new technocratic government, given all the challenges that you outlined, what would you anticipate to fundamentally change, especially if
With regards to what, sorry?
with regard to the technocratic government, the appointment of new people not belonging to the political factions, given all the challenges you outlined, particularly with regard to access to Palestinian Authority funds and things like that, surging Israeli settler violence, given all those challenges, what does a new technocratic government what kind of change can they bring about under those circumstances? And you talked a lot about elections. How soon do you think those would come about?
That's why I said that this government is offered by the state of Palestine by way of uniting our people and our geography and providing for our immense, unprecedented needs. But that government will not be able to do so without creating an enabling environment for that government. That government cannot be formed or functioning if a person like Smotrich, who happened to be the finance minister of Israel, keeps deciding should we be receiving our own money or not. Our money, our taxes. That government cannot function should we still have all the crippling checkpoints and walls that has torn apart our economy and shrinked our economic base. That government cannot function if we still have no control over our resources, natural resources, land and what have you. That government will not be able to function if we do not have control of our borders. So we create our own and conduct our own international trade agreements like any other government. Of course, the government will have to levy, will have to create its own revenue base. And those are the revenue bases. International help will go in the form of programs that will help in the reconstruction, what have you. But our budget has to come from our revenues. So it is crucial, it is absolutely crucial that we make sure that the new government is enabled. And this is the discussion, this is the conversation we are having with our regional and international partners. And we are presenting all these partners with clear plan and way forward of how a new government can function and can deliver. What was the other one?
Elections. How soon do you think those might happen?
You know, our people are under an unprecedented situation of genocide. 70% of Gaza's housing are gone. Most of our infrastructure otherwise. So in all practical terms, this is not expected to be immediate. You need to heal the wounds. Immediate, but this should not be also too long. So it is rather months, but not years. Patrick, sorry, I'll come there.
Thank you, Ambassador. Last time I was here, you spoke very eloquently about the demonstrations in London and to the effect that you regarded them as the best of Britain in a way. Now it's being said that the Mayor of London has been got control of by Islamists. I was wondering whether you'd like to comment on that. And secondly, there seems to be more talk in America now about the possibility that Israel will develop a plan to undertake a land offensive in Rafah, and that America seems to be more open to the possibility that this can be done without causing a humanitarian disaster. I wonder if you could comment on that. are worried America is going to endorse that?
Thank you, Patrick. Yes, I did say that the last few months have seen the worst of the UK, as in the UK government inconsistent policy, and what you have seen in the Parliament last week, failing to vote for a simple resolution motion for an immediate ceasefire, instead politicking. That was not a good moment. But on the other hand, I have said and continue to say that these demonstrations did bring out the best of the UK, the best of Britain, in every sense. Because for 5 months, every week, hundreds of thousands of people demonstrating peacefully, calling for ceasefire, that is commendable. That is commendable. These were the most peaceful demos, perhaps, in recent memory. Not one act of violence. Because those are the peace seekers. So shame on everyone and anyone who would like to or are trying to frame them otherwise. As for the issue of the Mayor of London, we must fight Islamophobia as much as and equally as we fight anti-Semitism and all forms of racism and bigotry. Because guess what? If you only fight one form of racism and you don't fight the other, then you are not anti-racist, you are racist. It's as simple as that. You are racist. And Islamophobia in the UK has risen by 335% in the last 5 months or so. 335%. It's only Muslims and Palestinians who have been violently attacked over the last few months. Some of them, unfortunately, murdered. A child, 6 years old in the US, stabbed 26 times by his own landlord because of the indoctrination and the hatred and the racism. Together with his mother, 3 Palestinian students were shot in Vermont a couple of months ago because of the anti-Palestinian racism and the Islamophobia. Because they had a kufiyya. They were walking in the streets. Bright kids, I know them. And in London and in the UK, there has been many violent attacks against Muslims. So this is a very serious issue, and we need to see equal treatment to uproot all forms of racism equally. Rafah, yes, we think the US should not mince its words here. An Israeli attack, ground invasion of Rafah is going to bring untold suffering, casualties, fatalities, despair. Untold. Just told you there's 1.5 million people in a very small piece of land, 6,000 per 1 kilometer, 6,000 people per 1 kilometer. Can you imagine Israel going with the way it did in the north or in the middle of Gaza or in Khan Yunis? They would kill tens of thousands. And we believe that the whole deal about Rafah is about the final push for mass expulsion. And that's why it must be prevented. The US cannot mince its words here. Yeah, I'll have to diversify, so I'll go to the left. I'm centric, but I'll go to the left and then I'll come to the right. Please.
Thanks very much, Minister. Just following on those comments about the protests, we are, of course, also in an election year in the UK. How best would you think the pro-Palestinian voices can influence that, and what would be your advice for them? And then also on the ceasefire terms that you were sort of talking about earlier, how acceptable do you think the framework that we've sort of seen go out overnight is and will be to mass? I mean, how likely do you think it is that we might actually get the ceasefire overnight?
Regarding regarding the first question, again, back to the demos. You know, people are focusing on the demos because you know, they see it's a physical act of solidarity, and it's massive, so it's noted. But it's not just the demos. It's not just the demos. There are civic acts everywhere in the UK. There are thousands of letters being sent to MPs. There is unprecedented mobilization by the British people. And it is the British people, by the way, because people would like to frame it in a certain manner. Those are Islamists, those are far leftists. Those are the British people. I have been to these demos, most of them. I spoke there, and I walked, I marched along them. And what I've seen was so inspiring, so humane, so touching, so moving. Families, babies on strollers. It's almost like a sense of solidarity and support, but also it has a festive mood of celebrating their own humanity. But it goes beyond marches and demonstrations. Only last week, 80,000 Britons, 80,000 lobbied the parliament for an immediate ceasefire. 80,000. These are high numbers and big numbers. This is a phenomenon. This is a movement. This is very serious and real. And I think this is different this time. It's sustainable. I believe it will stay after reaching a ceasefire. People want to go all the way. Therefore, we must not misread what is happening, because people are people, and the British people are renowned for their activism. The anti-apartheid movement emanated from London. How inspiring is that for us, the Palestinians? That now London and the UK is the epicenter. It is the epicenter of international activism for Palestine. And to draw the parallels with South Africa, we are on the right path. And given the historic relevance and the historic responsibility of the UK, i.e. the Balfour Declaration, and what happened since then and the British mandate, it could not be more relevant that this anti-occupation, anti-colonization movement emanates also from London and from the UK. And we need to see it in that manner. And I think it will grow. Maybe not in numbers, because we have the numbers. You're talking about mass movement, but it will grow in effect, in impact, in diversification, in influence, in getting more pressure on the political decision-making process. As for the second question, which is the ceasefire, how confident? You know, the matter is in the hands of Israel. Because there is a formula that was offered by the mediators, Qatar, Egypt, and with them the US. And this formula has been there for the last few months. And remember, Israel has gotten almost half of its hostages because of diplomatic offers before, because of peaceful and diplomatic ways to resolve this issue. And the same offers have been on the table, and these countries have been mediating. Netanyahu so far sees the end of this aggression as the end of his political career. It's as simple as that. He's bragging, he's gaslighting you and all of us. He talks about, you know, possible agreements. He's just buying time. And he knows how to do the game of deceit, the game of words, the game of, you know, buying time, and then the game of blame. So you might hear him in a couple of days' time blaming everybody else. But number two, the more dangerous elements within his government are the ones who are really, we need to watch. He is personally vested in the continuation of the aggression. But elements of his, and the most strong elements of his coalition, of his government, are interested in the ethnic cleansing. And they made no secret out of it. They're public about it. They want to seize this opportunity to finish off what Israel started 76 years ago. People like Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, and many others have a plan. And they were waiting for the right moment to implement their plan. Please go back and read what Smotrich wrote and published publicly. Already 2017. And that's how he got himself into the Israeli political system. He wrote that Palestinians have three options. Either they accept to be ruled by us, second-class citizens, coin it the way you want, or they are allowed to and forced to leave, or they're killed. So that ideological element into the conversation. I'm saying all that to say, I do not trust Israel will accept a dignified diplomatic ceasefire deal unless it is forced to. And to be forced to do so, it needed the US and the UK to tell Netanyahu, we will stop providing you with the weapons that you are killing these children with. We will stop giving you all the material support that allows you to violate the basic provisions of international law. Then Netanyahu will listen. But so far, he's playing all of us. Yes, I'll come here and then I'll go there. And I'll come to you. Sorry. Yes. Here.
Well, how will you get Hamas to agree to your plans for the what can you do to get into an agreement with them?
As I said earlier, this isn't about Hamas, this isn't about Fatah. And I made it clear and I say it again. This is about the Palestinian people. And the Palestinian people have a state. The state is occupied. And that state came about because of the struggle of the Palestinian people over a period of 100 years. It's beyond political factions. This is a moment for our people, wounded and destituted, sleeping in open air places in Rafah and everywhere, unable to feed their children, unable to treat their ill, having lost their homes. And even if they go back to some resemblance of a makeshift home, they have no schools to send their children. This is a moment for our people, for the unity of our people and the unity of our system. However, you know, we have dialogues, and I believe having a one government that cares for, provides for, protects, deals with the catastrophe we are in is a matter of Palestinian internal conversations. This is an internal matter, and I believe there is consensus about that. And it's our issue, by the way. We deal with it. So I hear a lot of the international, did Hamas agree? This is none of your business. It's none of your business. There is a government that represents the Palestinian people that, you know, by the way, it's the PLO that represents the Palestinian people, but there is a government, the umbrella of that government, the political umbrella is the PLO, but that government is entrusted to provide for the entire people everywhere. Dominique, even though I'm hesitant, I'm sorry, I have been more right-wing than left-wing. I'll come back to the Dominique.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you for this. Can I ask a couple of things? One is, I mean, you say it's no one's business, but surely it's a valid question. Is Hamas being consulted about the construction of this new government? And you say time is of the essence, and yet we're in a limbo now. We have the Prime Minister resigning, but no new government being announced. How long will we have to wait? And lastly, would you regard, you've talked about Islamophobia, would you say that Les Anderson's comments about Sadiq Khan and Keir Starmer were Islamophobic or not?
No, answering the second question, this is really a matter of the UK for, I think that definition of Islamophobia has been very well put forward by UK Muslim leaders and by UK leaders in general. It has been part of the parliamentarian discussion for years, and now there is a definition. There is a very clear definition of what anti-Muslims Islamophobia means. And therefore, you need to measure whatever was said up against that definition. That definition. You know. However, to paint the most moving act of the British people, the most peaceful, the act that shows that people have roots and have principles, to paint them as Islamists with an S, in my opinion, is Islamophobic, anti-Palestinian, and anti-British. Anti-British. Because I was there, Dominique. I didn't see Islamists. I saw mothers, saw grandmothers. I saw Christians, I saw Jewish people. brothers and sisters. I saw your society at best. I saw the diversity and the unity. I saw the passion. So trying to frame all the time and divide all the time is a very, very serious business that has gone on for a long time. Did I answer?
Thank you. Sorry, and about Hamas being consulted.
خلاص أدوني. ها؟
How long will it take before new government's announced? And is Hamas being consulted as part of the construction?
Well, there are mediators in this. There are mediators in this. Qatar is included, and Egypt, of course. And yes, there are consultations. Yes, there are consultations, of course. But again, this isn't a matter for Fatah or Hamas or PFLP or DFLP or all that. This is a matter of the state of Palestine. That's what I'm trying to explain. Now, of course, the state of Palestine would have to consult nationally because it's people that it represents, has to consult regionally and internationally. But it's a decision that is taken by the state of Palestine as represented by its legitimate institutions, primarily the PLO. Okay, I'll go left now, and I'll go there and then here.
سعادة السفير، كيف تقيمون المسار القانوني وجلسات الاستماع في محكمة العدل الدولية بشأن الإبادة الجماعية والآثار القانونية للاحتلال الإسرائيلي، وهل تعولون عليه كسلطة وطنية فلسطينية؟ والسؤال الآخر لو سمحت، تعقيبك على حادث الجندي الأمريكي الذي أحرق نفسه البارحة احتجاجا على حرب في غزة وهو يصرخ الحرية لفلسطين، فهل يمكن أن تحدث هذه الحادثة المأساوية هزة في ضمير الإدارة الأمريكية وقف دعم إسرائيل بالتواطؤ مع حكومة نتنياهو؟ شكرا.
You want me to answer in Arabic or English?
In English.
In English? Okay. The ICJ and the accountability side and the South Africa case against Israel for committing suicide is genocide, is the first serious real step in the international arena towards accountability. South Africa has shown us the way forward as far as how responsible states should act. And the ICJ itself, as the highest court on planet, our highest court, our Supreme Court, humanity's Supreme Court, has delivered its verdict. On the provisional side of the verdict, they said that Israel has to stop the killing, Israel has to stop the destruction, Israel has to allow for humanitarian aid to go through Gaza unhindered, Israel has to stop tampering with any evidence of genocide, Israel has to submit a report, and they did. I was following yesterday, but it was a secret report, wasn't revealed. And that's why I outlined in my introductory remarks that Israel has violated every provision of these provisional orders. And on the issue of the merit of genocide, the court said that South Africa's case against Israel for committing genocide is plausible, i.e. there is substantial evidence that Israel is committing genocide, and therefore the court has admitted officially put Israel on trial for genocide. This is very serious. This is very, very serious. And this is a moment for the international system, including the international judicial system, to deliver its own responsibilities and the mandate on which it was established. As for the U.S. military pilot, I have no words, really. I have no words to describe how I feel, except to blame President Biden for that. President Biden could have ended this long ago. Because it is America that provides Israel with all the toys to commit a genocide. And I'll stop there.
Hello, Ambassador. Thank you for the informative address. Just going back to the demos, the slogan "From the river to the sea" has become a controversial thing as a talking point. Split opinion about what it means. One side says it's simply an expression of Palestinian liberation. Others say implicit in the chant is the eradication of Israel because it talks about from the river to the sea. What's your definition of it?
I knew you will ask one of these difficult questions. Number one, don't focus on politicking everything, because, the charter of the ruling party in Israel, you know very well what it says. And these are not just individuals chanting in the streets of London. These are the rulers of Israel, right? Netanyahu. Go back to their official charter. See what does it say in the Likud charter. It says Palestine, effectively, Palestine doesn't exist. Israel is from the river to the sea. That's the ruling party for you. And the Israeli people elected that ruling party on the basis of that charter. Number two, the coalition agreement that brought this last government has second item in it saying that this government will oversee the right of self-determination for the Jewish people, only exclusive to the Jewish people from the river to the sea, the government. Why aren't you on the BBC have backed on that?
Well, we did.
No, you didn't.
Well, we did.
No, you didn't. Why didn't it become such a global outcry that the ruling party in Israel and the Prime Minister of Israel and the key ministers of Israel are calling for the eradication of the Palestinian people? Why didn't we have such an outcry when Netanyahu went to the last General Assembly with the map of historic Palestine saying that this is the state of Israel? Why didn't we hear the British Prime Minister here saying that this is against international law, this is against British politics and policy, and this is anti-Palestinian, and this is eradicating Palestine? We didn't hear all these cries. As for eradicating Israel, no one is eradicating Israel. It is Israel that is literally eradicating the Palestinian people as we speak, by deeds and by words. And I believe those who mean well in these marches use this slogan to call for justice of the people who live in the land from the river to the sea. I don't believe those people who are pro-justice, pro-ceasefire want to eradicate anybody. If they want to eradicate, they want to eradicate the system of apartheid that is built from the river to the sea. They want to eradicate the racial domination system that was built. They want to eradicate the colonial settlement expansion and the theft of land and the theft of resources. They want to eradicate the besiegement of millions of people over years. So this is a call for justice for everybody, not eradication of anybody. Yeah. Can we take the last two questions, please? Here and there.
Thank you. So just on the back of that, there was a lot of outrage last week when that slogan was projected on to Big Ben. The Prime Minister has actually publicly condemned it. What would you say on that? And also on the back of the protest, it's come out that around an estimated £18.9 million was spent on protests in London alone between October and December last year. A lot of people are saying it's taking resources away from the police for other matters. So what would you say on that too, please?
Thank you for the question. I answered the first question about the slogan from the river to the sea. I think the way I answered it is the way I believe in it. And we should not, you see, the best form of protest, the best form of opposition is when people come out peacefully in the streets. We should promote that because the alternative is much worse. We need to promote this culture of voicing your voice, your beliefs, your principles peacefully. And I think this is what democracies offer. These countries have fought, and the people of these countries have fought for a long time to have these rights. So to associate these rights with budget, then the list goes on. You will strip all these rights, all of these rights. The right to protest, the right to assemble, the right to the freedom of speech is an integral part of the UK and its democracies. It's a constitutional and foundational tenet. Don't lose it over some political arguments here and there It is almost a right, not almost, it is like the right of you being treated in the NHS, like the right of you being educated. That is costly, and this is much less costly, but it's a right that needs to be protected and nurtured. And I think many of those who are using the financial argument, in my opinion, are using it because they have not found sufficient pretexts to stop the demonstrations. And now they are pulling that card, that rabbit. Few million pounds to make sure that the entire people of the UK are heard might not be the big issue here. The big issue is to make sure that people are heard and people continue to have the space to demonstrate peacefully within the rule of law that is granted to them in the UK. Yeah.
Ambassador, thank you very much. Two questions. One is on the back of some of the feedback and talking to people on these protests, not just in the last 5 months, but also previously. We talk about unity as Muslims. I think there is quite a lot of unity when it comes to upholding justice, when it comes to the rights of everyone involved in this. But how do you see that with Muslim governments? I mean, we know about some of the key players, but overall, it is a very vast Muslim world with a lot of influence, with a lot of pressure that can be exerted. How do you see that?
You mean the role of the Muslim community?
Yes, is that enough? Is there enough being done on that end?
Well, the Muslim community in the UK is one of the most successful, integrated, large minorities. Talking about official figures, 4.5 million. Many tell me it's a bit higher than that. This community has been here for a long time, and it has been showing of late the success of being an integral part of the success of the UK. I mean, the mayor of this great city is Muslim. The first minister of Scotland is a Muslim. The head of opposition in Scotland is a Muslim, and the list goes on. And this speaks volumes of the success of this country. This is a huge success, and it's not just the Muslim community, all communities. This country has, the Prime Minister comes from a minority. And the UK's ability to embrace all the minorities and the minorities' ability to contribute to the UK is something to be celebrated. That's number one. And it's an example, by the way, because other countries, even around you, have not managed to, have failed. So this is a key thing, a key component. That's why populism and divisive policy now, divisive rhetoric is very dangerous, because you are turning the most successful, inspiring model for the rest of the world into this divisiveness. I believe the Muslim community has a voice, and it's an important voice. And I think of late they have been rather mobilized to make sure that their voices are heard. But let me say this, and I say it from my heart, because I meet many of our Muslim brothers and sisters here, and I encounter many of them. They support Palestine not only because they are Muslims, but because they are British. They support Palestine because they are humans. And so they support Palestine because these are their values, because they support all other issues of justice. And look back. They were among the biggest forces against wars in Iraq or elsewhere. Yes, I see a sense of unity in the Muslim community. I do see. I see mobilization, and I see that they want to assert more their British identity, but at the same time, their very specific principles and teachings. And yes, Palestine is the address, is the home of all main religions, and we are so proud of that. We are the birthplace of Christianity. Bethlehem is, and Jerusalem, Al-Aqsa, is the Muslim first Qibla, and Muslims have affinity and affection and belief. So this has to be respected. This must be respected. This is not bias.
What about government?
What do you mean government?
Islamic countries, Muslim countries, their support.
Well, there is support. There is support, but we need more support. There is support, but we need much more support from Arab and Muslim countries, particularly soon after the guns stop, because the task of redressing what Israel has destroyed is going to be immense. I think we will need a lot of brotherly and sisterly support, and we will need a lot of international support to make sure that people and the situation is remedied in the shortest period of time possible. Can I thank you with that and say, well done?